Welcome back to Pour Temecula. Rick is away, so I have my friend Kylie here with me to talk all about rosé. While she's not in the wine industry, she loves wine and, more importantly, loves to learn about wine. So welcome, Kylie. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. As Shannon mentioned, I am not a wine professional by any means. I am not in the industry, but I grew up appreciating wine. I love tasting different wines, and I have really enjoyed being adjacent to Shannon's journey of becoming a somm and getting into the wine industry because I'm learning so much by just being next to it. And I love learning specifically about what I like and don't like in wine, and being able to put words to that has been a really fun journey.
You're also really good at blind tasting. Like, you have a very good nose and a good palate for picking things up, which I think not everybody has, and it is a talent.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's been really fun to blind taste with you because as you've learned the technical terms for things, it's fun that I can pick out something and you can actually attach that to a wine and say, oh, you smell, copper pennies in this. That must mean that this process has happened and it's this style from this region. So it's really cool to taste together and bring together what I taste on my palate with what you know about what that means. And that's been really fun.
Yeah, Kylie and I have done a lot of blind tasting events together.
Yeah. Some more successful than others.
Yeah, we make a good team.
Yeah.
On the Pour Temecula podcast, we always like to start out our episodes by talking about what we've been drinking. It could be anything: wine, beer, cocktails. So I'll let you go first. What have you been drinking?
I have recently tried a couple Italian whites, which I know you'd be really excited about. I order pretty safe. Like, if I'm going to a restaurant, it's going to be a New Zealand Sauv Blanc or a French Rosé or a California Cab. But I'm trying to branch out, inspired by you. First, I got a white from my wine club over in San Juan, from San Juan Capistrano. I guess I should intro that, from South Orange County. And my local wine bar has a wine club, and my husband and I are in the tier where we get to red wines. But when we go to pick it up, you can taste all the other wines. And so if I ever go into my wine fridge and I see a white wine that I don't recognize, I know it's because we liked one of the wine club white wines so much that we got it, but I never remember it. And so I found this Italian white in my wine fridge. I was like, must be from wine club, and took it to a party and had it. And it was delicious. It was beautifully acidic, a lot of minerality, which, I'm a sucker for minerality. It was really good. And it was 100% Capretone, grown on the side of a volcano, hence the minerality. So that was really delicious. And then last night I was at an Italian restaurant and figured I should go Italian. Ended up with a Vermentino and had such a fun pairing experience. It actually paired so well with Bolognese, of all things. I was not expecting that. We ordered just kind of family style. We had a bunch of things at the table. So I just ordered what I felt like drinking, not necessarily thinking about pairing, and had a bite of Bolognese and a sip of the Vermentino. And it was heavenly. I think because the Bolognese was so deliciously salty that the Vermentino just balanced it really nicely. Yes, it was so delicious. So that's been my little Italian white journey.
That's fun.
Yeah. What have you been drinking?
Sticking with the Italian theme, I went wine tasting at Botaya for my birthday.
Yes.
And did a little wine tasting there. I always go for 3 whites and their rosé, because you get 4 tastings in your flight. And this time I was like, I'm going to branch out and do something different. Well, I didn't.
Shocker.
I got their rosé. Also tried their Fiano, which is one of my favorite white wines in Temecula. Love that one. And then I think I tried the Pinot Grigio, which was fine. It wasn't my favorite, but I think if you like a lighter style that's really easy to drink, you probably will like that. And then I had their Vermentino, which I thought was delicious. So that's kind of
in the air.
Yeah. So that's what I've been drinking.
Yay.
Okay, so let's talk rosé. Kylie will be asking some listener questions, and then we'll talk about the different ways that rosé is made and taste our way through some Temecula rosés to see if we can spot the different winemaking techniques. So Kylie, take it away.
Let's get started. These are great because they are listener questions, but reading through them, I'm like, oh, these are Kylie questions too. I'd like to know the answer to all of these. So where did rosé come from?
So in my research, it started in the late 1800s in Bordeaux, of all places, where wine was made with Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. They called it claret. So if you might still hear that term or see that on the market.
That looks familiar.
I think claret might also be a grape from France, which is confusing.
Which is unusual for a French wine to be named after the grape.
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Okay.
And France is still responsible for almost a third of the whole world's production of rosé. And Provence is now the best known region in France for rosé rather than Bordeaux.
Does the color have anything to do with the sweetness? This is definitely a question that I have because I am biased thinking when I get a very bright pink glass of rosé, I already have the assumption that, oh, this is going to be too sweet. And if I see a very pale rosé, I think, oh, this will be nice and dry. So I'm curious to get the answer to this question.
Yes. And I actually had the same question or had the same bias before I started studying wine. So no, the color is only a direct result of the skin contact with the grape juice. However, typically when you do order a sweet rosé, they are darker in color.
Okay. So there is some justification for the bias, but it's not necessarily always true.
Yes.
And is the alcohol percentage the same as reds and whites, or what's the typical alcohol range for a rosé?
So alcohol levels, typically speaking, are lower in white wine and rosé, but it's really dependent on the amount of sugar in the grapes when they're harvested. So if the grapes are very ripe, they'll have more sugar. More sugar means more food for the yeast because they turn sugar into alcohol. So there's plenty of lower alcohol red wines being made, but it's not really the norm, especially in Temecula because climate is so hot, so our grapes ripen really easily.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the alcohol is typically lower in white wine and rosé.
This is a fun question. Does it matter if you switch between red, white, and rosé while you're drinking? Will it cause a worse hangover?
So, not a doctor, but your hangover is likely caused by dehydration. So you can drink any color of wine, and as long as you're hydrating in between each glass and getting electrolytes, you should feel okay the next day. Maybe not if you drink, 5 bottles of wine and 5 bottles of water, probably won't work. But if you're just drinking a normal amount of wine, as long as you chase that with water, you should be okay.
That seems similar to the answer a couple weeks ago when you were chatting with Samsung about sulfites. A similar concept of everything in moderation. The sulfites in a glass of wine are probably not the reason you have a headache if you're not also drinking water and taking care of yourself outside of that glass of wine.
Exactly.
What grapes are used to make rosé?
So to make rosé, you would be using red grapes, anything from Zinfandel to Sangiovese, Grenache. You can use Cabernet Sauvignon. You need red grapes because that's where the color comes from, is from the skins.
Makes sense. You need a little bit of red to make that pink. What kind of food pairs with rosé? This is a Shannon question if there ever was one.
So it depends on the style of the wine. If you're getting a sweet, full-bodied rosé, it's obviously going to be different from a very light, dry Provence style. However, I will say rosé is a perfect picnic wine because it pairs with virtually everything. Charcuterie is a good option. My favorite pairing that I've done at my wine dinners has been burrata cheese with fresh strawberries, basil, balsamic vinegar, and olive oil. And I paired that with a rosé of Sangiovese, and it was phenomenal.
That sounds incredible. I like dry rosé. So how can I tell if what I'm buying at the store is dry or sweet?
So there's not a lot of rules and regulations around what a rosé has to be. So there's a huge variety in style, and it doesn't always say on the label what you're buying. So I will say if you pay attention to the region, that can be a good indicator. So if you see something that says Provence style, it should typically be light, dry wine. If you see something labeled as Rosé de Loire, as in the Loire Valley in France, that is always going to be dry. That's actually one of their regulations. However, they do make other rosés in the Loire.
So it has to say that
specific Rosé de Loire.
Okay.
Rosés from Italy, Provence, Tavel are typically dry just as the style of the region, but the body and color might vary. So if you like dry rosé, those are a good bet. But if you're at a wine shop or a restaurant, you can always ask somebody who works there and they will hopefully know.
Point you in the right direction. Rosé used to be referred to as blush wine, but now it's called rosé. What's the difference, or is there one? Was it just a change in marketing terms?
So blush was a marketing term. It was used to differentiate and normalize American rosé in the market, but now blush refers to wine made from a blend of white and red grapes. It's usually off-dry, meaning there's a little hint of sweetness.
So that's good to know for people who like a sweet wine. So we talked about how to identify a dry wine, but if you like a sweeter rosé, that's great. Look for a blush wine.
Correct.
Is direct press the same as making a Blanc de Noir?
Sort of. For those of you that don't know, and you've probably heard Rick and I talk about Blanc de Noir, that is a term used to describe red wine that's made in the style of white wine. So you have red grapes, but you basically press them and immediately get the juice away from the skin, so there's no color. So you're basically making a white wine out of red grapes. It's basically a direct press method, which is one of the methods to make rosé.
Is white Zinfandel a rosé? I love this question because Shannon and I were recently somewhere where we ordered a rosé and ended up getting a white Zinfandel because I think the person serving us saw a pink bottle of wine, assumed that was the rosé, and served it to us. And we were very surprised at what we tasted. So I know the answer to this is no.
We were.
Oh, it is.
It is. We were expecting a Provence rosé, and they gave us a very sweet white Zinfandel. I will say, white Zinfandel is technically a rosé. It's made with Zinfandel grapes. However, up to 25% of white grapes can be used to make it as well. So it could technically be a blend. It can be made by a whole variety of ways. It doesn't always have to be sweet. So speaking of that, let's talk about the winemaking techniques. Rosé can sometimes have the reputation of being a less serious wine or a fun girly wine, but the truth is a lot of skill goes into making a good rosé. So let's talk about the winemaking.
Coming in, I really thought that there was only one way of making rosé wine. I didn't realize that there were so many different methods. So the method that I was most familiar with is maceration. So the grapes are harvested and then either destemmed or kept as whole bunches and pressed, just like direct press that we talked about with the Blanc de Noir. But the juice doesn't drain right away into another container. It sits with the skins for a matter of minutes, hours, or days to extract some color and tannins. And the longer the juice sits with the skins, the darker the wine will be. And then the more tannins, the more body the wine will have. So winemakers have to be very intentional with varietal selection and maceration length, because that's going to significantly affect what the wine tastes like at the end.
Yep. And then direct press, just like we talked earlier, grapes are harvested and then either destemmed or kept as whole bunches and pressed, causing the juice to be squeezed out into a separate container without spending any time with the grape skins. It usually results in a very delicate wine with more floral notes. However, the stronger you press the grapes, the more color will get extracted. And if you do a very slow press, the juice is in contact with the skins a little bit longer and can get more color. So it's not always going to be a darker, or it's not always going to be a lighter colored rosé. Fun fact, this is actually how the base wine for sparkling wine is made, by direct press.
Interesting. So it sounds like direct press and maceration are similar, but direct press happens a lot faster. Maceration sits for a little bit to get that color, the tannins, the body.
Correct. And then blending, also known as blush, like we talked about. This is exactly what it sounds like. You can blend white wine and red wine together to make a rosé, which sounds a little funky.
It totally sounds funky. When we were making the podcast, I jokingly said, oh, you make rosé by blending red and white, thinking I was being goofy and sarcastic. And Shannon enlightened me that actually that is a valid way of making rosé. So I'm learning so much today.
It is. So sometimes they do it during fermentation or sometimes after. And the amount of red wine used will obviously determine how dark the final wine is. And blending is actually not allowed in quite a few regions around the world, but there's somewhere very famous that uses this method, which is Champagne, France. And they're making some very high quality, expensive wines this way.
Indeed.
So our last method, I'm going to have Kylie pronounce this because she speaks French way better than I do.
So saignée, it rhymes with beignet, like the donuts. So saignée.
Saignée. It literally means to bleed in French. So imagine you have a big tank filled with crushed grapes. The juice starts to ferment, and then you start to empty the tank from the bottom, bleeding off that juice into another tank. This juice continues to ferment in its new tank without all of the grape skins and pulp, and that is how the Saignée Rosé wine is made. It's typically darker in color and a little more structured. It's a very popular method in Tavel in southern Rhone, if you've heard of that region. But again, the color does not have to do with the sweetness.
And what happens to the rest of the juice and the grapes from that first tank?
So the winemaker can actually make red wine from it.
Oh,
and
cool.
Because they've drained off some of the juice, what's left in there is a very concentrated, darker, deeper color red wine because there's less juice to skin ratio.
Nice. So that would make something pretty bold and heavy, I would imagine.
Correct. Okay, now that we all know how rosé is made, I spent some time out in wine country searching for rosés. Almost every winery had at least one. So I was actually able to find 4 Temecula wines that were each made with one of the 4 techniques we just talked about. So Kylie and I are going to blind taste them and see if we can match the wine to the winemaking technique.
I'm so excited. This is what I've been looking forward to, the tasting.
And none of these are sweet wine. I will preface with that. They're all dry.
Which is amazing because the color differences are drastic. The one that we're starting with is very pale, almost yellowish, like a yellowish orange. The one all the way to our right is so bright, so pink. It almost looks like a really light Pinot Noir. Like I would believe that was a light red wine if you showed it to me. So I'm excited to see how that color plays into the taste, if at all, and what these taste like.
Yeah, and for everybody listening, because this is obviously very hard to follow along, you can check out our Instagram. I'll be posting pictures of the 4 wines that we're drinking, and we'll refer to the lightest one as wine number 1, and then the darkest one as wine number 4, if that works for you.
Okay, should we start with number 1?
Let's start.
Cheers.
Cheers. I kind of get some lemon.
I'm getting, this is going to sound weird, but I'm getting like almost like a butterscotch smell.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah. There is a
candy, like something candy-ish. It doesn't smell sweet. It's just like the candy smell.
It's got that yeah, that's interesting.
Maybe even like watermelon candy.
Ooh, I like that call.
Okay, I'm going to taste it. Oh, that's really nice.
Wow, that's good.
I really like that.
It's got a good texture to it. Like it kind of coats your tongue in a really nice way.
But not overly oily like some heavier wines would.
Right.
Like it's a light coating.
A light coating.
Dusting. I like that. It's definitely, in my non-professional opinion, I would say that is a dry rosé, but it's not overly acidic either. It's not making my mouth water. It's very easy to drink.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Wine number 2.
Wine number 2. Whoa, that smells very different. Oh, we should probably be talking about the techniques as we're tasting these.
Yeah. So, well, first, do you want to say the color?
Oh yeah, the color. This one definitely, in my mind, is like typical Provence style rosé. It's a very light pink, but it's a true pink.
I would agree. I definitely get cherry and almost like a cherry lemonade without it being like sweet.
I feel like there's a tiny, tiny, tiny hint of smokiness to it.
Yeah, there is something like savory.
Or maybe not smoke, maybe just earthy.
Yeah,
earthy. Yeah, savory is a good word for it. There's something a little bit savory about it.
This actually does remind me, like all of these are from Temecula, but this actually does remind me of a wine from Provence because they do have that like herbal floral note to it sometimes, like in the background behind all the fruit, which I think this has some sort of dried herbal thing.
And a little bit of minerality, which is my buzzword.
Yeah, I really like wine number 2.
Me too. The first impression of it was jarring because it's so different from wine number 1, but I'm really enjoying it for different reasons.
Any thoughts yet before we move on to number 3?
I'm gonna check back at my notes and reread the different methods to see. I'm gonna guess that wine 2, at least, is probably either direct press or maceration. Just feeling like those are the more traditional methods, resulting in a more traditional Loire, Provence style wine. So that would be my guess. Number one tastes different when I go back to it now.
It smells so different too now, actually.
Mm-hmm.
1 is very aromatic.
Very.
There's a lot going on.
The nose is punchy.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to 3.
Okay. Just edit out all of our indecision. Okay, I'll let you describe the color on this one because it's interesting.
Yeah, so this one's a little bit darker than wine number 2, but instead of being that straight pink color, it's got a little like salmon copper.
Salmon, yes, that's a perfect word for it.
Yeah, it's still very
Coppery.
light in color, but
yeah, we had to kind of go back and forth on which one should come first because they're very similar in intensity of color, but this hue is a little
just
bit
a little bit darker.
different. The nose is very, in my opinion, typical rosé.
Mm-hmm.
But,
It tastes
but
good.
based on your face, maybe the taste is a little unexpected.
It's very fruity in a good way. I get a lot of strawberry on that one.
Definitely strawberry.
That one, this wine number 3 has like strawberry lemonade vibes, where wine number 2 was more like cherry lemonade, like rosemary vibes.
The herbaceous.
Yeah.
This one just tastes very clean. The word predictable sounds bad, but for me, I would be so happy if I wanted a rosé and I ordered this. This is exactly what I would expect, and I'd be so happy with it.
Yeah.
Like nothing is really throwing me too much, but it's just a really good glass of rosé.
Yeah.
Which is making me question everything about what we've tasted so far.
All right. Shall we do the last wine? Wine
I'm
number 4.
So interested to explore this wine.
So this one is very pink. I would honestly, like, test-wise, I would say this is like a pale ruby color. But as a rosé, it's a very deep, like, pink.
Whoa, that nose.
It smells like a red wine.
Okay, now I'm going to stick with smokiness. This smells a little bit smoky to me. Not in like a oaky cab way, just in more of a, like someone lit a match, 20 feet away and you just got like a little whiff of it.
I'm going to taste it.
I'm so curious. Oh, that tastes really nice. That's not what I was expecting.
Yeah. Yeah. If you ordered a rosé and somebody brought this to you before this podcast,
yes.
I would have thought this was like a sweet.
Excuse me. I'm so sorry, but you brought me the wrong wine. But after tasting it, it's really tasty.
It tastes like a rosé.
This one, it's not overly sour acidic, but it does give me a little bit of that like mouth-watering, fruity juiciness. Oh, juicy. I think this is juicy. I'm trying to think if I close my eyes and this was a true blind test and I hadn't seen the color of this wine, what would you expect it to look like?
This reminds me of a Sangiovese rosé I had in Italy, which I had a lot in Italy. Most of them were much lighter in color, but there was one that made theirs a little bit darker in color. And it was so like fruity and juicy and like deep like flavor. And this reminds me of that.
And it's not sweet. I completely judged this upon looking at the bottles thinking, this is going to be overly sweet. Look at that color, but it's not.
Yeah, this is delicious.
It's very pleasant.
Okay, so direct press typically would be lighter in color. However, the slower you press or the stronger you press, it could be very dark in color. Maceration, depending on how long the juice was with the skins, it could be very light in color or very dark in color. So I could see wine number 4 being either of those.
That's true.
Blending, depending on how much red wine you use, darker or lighter.
Could be anything.
Could be that too. Yeah. What do you think? What are you thinking? Gosh, wine number 1 keeps like changing. This is wild. I think I would typically drink these a little bit colder than they are right now, but for the podcast, I wanted them to be a little bit warmer so it would
We're getting all
open up more. Yeah.
Yeah, all the nuances. Okay, I have a hypothesis. So wine number 1, now that it's opened up, the nose to me smells like a glass of champagne. And because we know that direct press is how sparkling wine is made, I'm going to guess that number 1 is direct press, because this wine just gives me some champagne vibes, as you would say.
This is actually really wild. Now that you've said that, it 100% smells like a bready, yeasty, biscuity champagne.
Yes. Like not quite almondy, but like a full body champagne.
Yeah. Weird.
Okay, so that's my guess.
Okay.
I'm going 1. Okay, I'm going to put my notes. I think number 1 is direct press. Okay, based on that, I think number 3 is, for me, the most traditional tasting rosé. So I'm going to say wine number 3 is maceration. What do you think?
Yeah, I think 2 or 3 could be maceration. I'm with you on 1. I don't think 1 is like a traditional maceration or saignée.
So when we heard about the saignée method, you said that it's typically darker in color and a little more structured. Does that lead us to believe that our ruby red wine number 4 is saignée?
It could be. This is actually so difficult because there's so many things that can go into what makes these the way they look.
True.
It could also be the grape varietal.
Yeah.
It would be really fun if I was able to find like all 4 of these Grenache in all the different styles. I think it'd be a little bit easier, but you could have a direct press of something that has like really deep, dark, colorful skin, like Syrah.
Yeah, and you press it
if you did
really
a direct
hard.
Press, you would have a like very pale red wine, basically. And same thing with saignée. Like if you're making a red wine with, let's say, a Grenache, and you drain off some of it, it's probably going to be a little bit lighter. But if you were to do that with like a Syrah, like a very deep color, your color is going to be totally different.
Some of that body and texture.
So this is very difficult, and there's so much so many variables.
Yes.
Is what I was trying to say. So many variables.
Should I keep guessing or should you guess?
No, keep guessing.
Okay. My next guess, I think this is just a gut feeling that number 2 is blending. And I have no reason for that other than when I tasted it, my brain just went, blush. I think because the color is so perfectly blush.
It really is.
So that's probably wrong, but I'm gonna put that as my guess. So wine number 2 is blending, which means wine number 4 would be saignée, which, as we heard, typically results in a darker wine, but we also know that could be wrong for so many reasons.
I think based on like the way you got to all of these answers is perfect. There's so many variables. I don't think I would have even gotten it accurate. I will say, do you remember when you first tasted wine number 2 and you said it looked like a wine from Provence?
Yes.
So in Provence, they would do not direct press. They would do maceration for a very short amount of time.
Okay. So number 2 is probably our maceration.
That would be my guess.
Okay. I like it. Do you have any other insights? Anything else that you guessed differently on?
No, I'm confused with wine number 1 because of the champagne smell. However, okay, so I know we said direct press is how they typically make the juice, like the base wine for champagne.
But
however, champagne.
I know where you're going with this. You did say that in the Champagne region of France, it is common to blend. Okay, which makes sense because it also tastes a little bit unique. It's not, direct press is a more traditional method. Blending is not traditional, and wine number 1 definitely tastes non-traditional and is a common method in Champagne, France, which supports our theory that it smells like champagne. Okay, I'm going to officially change my guess to say that number 1 is blending.
All right, and then...
So what does that leave us? That leaves us...
Okay, so 1 blending, 2 Provence.
1 was blending, 2 maceration, 3 direct press, and 4 saignée.
Okay.
Let's
do the reveal.
Drum roll.
So wine number 1 is a blend. This is the Nude Vino Blanc from Corbeau Wine and Tea House. They're Mathilde Dubois winemaker, and it's a blend of Grenache and Sauvignon Blanc. I'm curious if this, I'll have to ask Reagan who makes it. I'll have to ask her if this spent any time on the lees, which would make it smell like a champagne.
Yep. Is that what gives it MLF?
That's different.
So, okay.
Yeah, those are two separate things. So MLF is more cheese rind, buttery, that kind of thing. Okay. And lees will do more like biscuity, almondy. That's where those kind of notes come from.
That makes sense. I definitely get some biscuity, almondy.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that spent some time on the lees. I'll have to ask her.
Okay, number 2 is our blush wine.
Nope.
It's called blush.
I know it's called blush.
Wait. Okay.
Which makes it even more confusing.
Okay. This is a wine called blush from Botaya, but it is actually maceration, which you were spot on. That is wine number 2 is maceration. So this is a Sangiovese rosé, which was macerated for 4 to 5 hours in cement tanks, which is why I got that minerality that I love from it.
There you go. Okay, wine number 3 is the saignée method of Grenache from Mesilla de la Viña.
Wait, really?
Yes.
No way.
Yes.
Number 3 was saignée. Okay.
Yeah. So they were probably making they actually call it Garnacha. So they were probably making a red wine and did the saignée method to drain some of it out and make a rosé of Garnacha.
That's amazing. And that to me was the most traditional tasting rosé with such a unique method. That's really cool.
Yep. All right. And the one that threw us off, wine number 4.
Wine number 4.
This is actually a direct press of Zinfandel from Akash.
Called Parlez-vous.
Yeah. So it's really wild because this is
wait, that one's direct press?
That one's direct press.
The darkest wine was direct press. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. So
definitely anyone who's listening, go look wherever these pictures are posted to see how dark this wine is. That's incredible. So it must have been a very
strong and
grape.
Long press.
What did you say it was?
Zinfandel.
Zinfandel. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I am shocked.
What did you think of all of these wines?
I liked them all. As you said, as you promised, none of them were sweet. They were all very dry and refreshing, but they were also very different. So I think I could see drinking all of these in different scenarios. Like number 3 is still going to be my porch pounder, my poolside classic rosé sip. But number 1 was so unique. I loved how it changed every time we went back to smell or taste it. Something new was popping up. Number 2 had that minerality that I love. And number 4 was so unique. It looks like a red wine, but you take a sip and it's refreshing and light and juicy and delicious and just so surprising. So I liked them all.
Awesome. Okay. So everybody listening, go out to all of these wineries and you can recreate this at home and taste everything that we've been tasting.
Yes.
So before we go, I have one very important question, Kylie. Kylie, what are you pairing with In-N-Out?
I love this question, and it is not a hypothetical question. This is a reality in our house. Very often. We live very close to In-N-Out, and I have a toddler who loves burgers and fries. We get In-N-Out all the time, and we also enjoy a glass of wine in the evening. So the wine that we reached for is very specifically a 2020 J-Lore Cabernet, which is, on paper, it's a grocery store wine. It's very affordable, good price point, but really good quality. It doesn't have some of the things that I don't like in mass-produced wine. It's like those fake oaky flavors or overly sweet or punchy. I find J-Lore to be very drinkable. And we found that specifically 2020, we had a bottle tucked away. We opened the 2020 bottle recently and realized it was incredible.
Ooh.
Like miles beyond any other year, especially after it had, quote unquote, aged for a couple of years. It was so delicious. So we went and scoured every Costco that we could find, looking at the bottom of how they stacked them all up, looking for the dusty crate in the back that was still 2020, and got a lot of dirty looks from Costco employees because we were pulling the 2021s off of the shelf to get to the 2020s. I think we probably bought 2 or 3 cases of 2020 J-Lore Cabernet. And we only have a few bottles left, but that is what we would open with In-N-Out.
Amazing. I love that story. All right. Thank you so much, Kylie, for joining. We hope you all enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram so you can see the rosé photos. And I'll also post where we got all of the wines from again and tag all of the wineries. Follow along at Pour Temecula. All right. Thank you, guys. Cheers.